Today on Crooked Mustache, we have this, the 2022 Volkswagen Atlas, and we're gonna review it and show you what Volkswagen's gargantuan SUV has to offer. Stay tuned. Now, in case it wasn't apparent, this thing is big. Here I am next to a RAV4 for comparison. You can see what I'm talking about. Now, the Atlas was introduced back in 2017 as a replacement here in the States for the Touareg. You can still get the Volkswagen Touareg, but only in Europe. Now, it's known as the Atlas here in the States and the Terramont in China, the other market where it was focused on. Now, the Atlas/Terramont is available in a few other markets, but here's the really cool thing. All of the Terramonts that are made for China are built in China. All of the Atlas and Terramonts built for every other market, that's the US, Chile, Middle East, Mexico, Colombia, everywhere else it's sold is built right here in the US in Chattanooga, Tennessee. Go figure. Now, one of the cool things, and we'll talk more about it later, is that this Atlas is probably one of the last Volkswagen Group products that might come with a variant of the VR6 engine, since a reworked 2-liter turbo is coming next year. But for now, we'll head inside. Now from the inside, we'll start with the front row, and the Atlas comes in two versions. There's a 2-row, which is the Cross Sport, and then there's the standard 3-row, which most growing families will probably opt for because of the seating arrangement. Now we'll get to the back seats in a minute, but we'll start with the driver's seat. From the driver's seat, there is a lot for you to do. Starting with Volkswagen's digital cockpit. Now there's two versions. The standard one comes with the 8-inch screen, and that is basically a traditional instrument cluster that operates on an LCD screen. Gives you all your information, cruise control, lane keep assist, radio station, stuff like that. Then you've got the 10-inch Pro. This thing is fully configurable. You can have a complete compass, complete navigation screen, everything is there. You can even select specifically what dials you want to see. And if you're really bored, you can have both dials show the same information. For whatever reason, that might be what piques your interest. It is fun that it will allow you to do that. And the menus are interesting. So you can do elevation, acceleration, MPG, tons of stuff. Really, really, really cool. Plenty to keep you entertained for minutes. Now, moving away from the digital cockpit, we actually have the touchscreen control center infotainment. Now, this thing's pretty cool. This is where you're going to control everything. You can control your nav, your radio, everything that you need, even your drive modes, which will show up here. And once you step up to the 8-inch screen, you do have the option to actually switch over and get the Fender stereo system, which adds a subwoofer just in case the standard stereo doesn't give you enough bass. Now, while upgrading to the 8-inch screen does add nav, I do feel like the average person is probably going to use the App Connect feature and run everything through their phone instead of actually using the integrated navigation. However, it is worth mentioning that as you actually step up to the 10-inch screen, you can use the App Connect control and connect your phone not only via USB, but also wirelessly. Now below that, you've got your AC controls, and it's a mix of knobs and buttons, but everything is there that you're gonna need. You get a knob for your temperature, a knob for your passenger's temperature, and these buttons up here to control where the air hitting you comes from, where it goes to, and this knob to control how hard it blows. Okay. Also worth mentioning, in the SEL, you get front heated seats. You do also get a heated steering wheel. Now, depending on the options trim that you go for, there is a version where you get ventilated seats up front in addition to the heated seats, as well as heated seats in the second row captain's chairs. We'll talk more about that in a second. Now, one of the things to remember is that depending on the trim level, you may actually increase some of the options, but you'll lose things like the heated steering wheel, which can be something that you may want to hold on to in cooler climates. And speaking of climate options, remembering with the remote start that's built into your key fob, you can actually get the car started so that if you're in a warmer climate, cool the cabin down, or if you're in a cooler climate, to the point where maybe there's ice and snow on the outside of the vehicle, you can actually heat it up and melt some of it off. Now, in terms of connectivity, you've got a few options. Down here, as you can see, I've actually got a cable plugged in. You've got two Type-C ports, as well as a separate 12-volt port for any other accessories, or maybe you have something that needs a USB-A port. That's an option. You've also got two cup holders, and shockingly, one that'll fit a bottle of this size perfectly fine. That is a definite plus. Also going down here, you've got your drive mode selector. Again, you do have the shifter, which does have a sport mode, but even Volkswagen puts this thing on backwards. Mazda's the only one that gets it right. In your center console, there is tons of storage. Now, before we move on to the back, one more thing worth mentioning. In the SEL, not only do you get an 8-way power adjustable driver's seat, with memory and up to 3 memory modes in case you, your spouse, and maybe somebody else need to share the car. But it's also worth mentioning the passenger gets not only a 4-way adjustable seat, but also an 8-way, with the seat going up, down, as well as tilting. And that's something that a lot of vehicles don't offer. Now, that's a big plus because there are many vehicles that while they offer a power passenger seat, they don't offer height adjustability, which is a concern for taller passengers. Now we're gonna move on to the back seat. I'm really interested in checking out those captain's chairs. Now, before we step in, I just noticed this and I wanted to mention it because this is a big deal. Now, these seats have 2 different ways of folding down. We'll cover both of them in a minute, but I wanna point out this specific feature. Here up here is the latch that you actually use to tilt the seat forward. The latch not only works forward, but, can you see my hand here?
Yes.
Not only works forward, but it also works backwards. Not only that, if you think about the ergonomics, if you're imagining you've got your hands full of groceries, you're gonna put something in the back, or you've got a small child with you, your instinct is to pull forward, not necessarily to lift up. As you can see, naturally your hand's pushing it in the way. So you come here, you reach in, boom, seat's open, child gets in the back, you come here with your left arm, boom, seat goes back down. That's something that's really intricate, and I'm sure there's a lot of people that use this and don't even realize how important it is. Now let's get inside so we can actually look at more. Now, before we move on to some of the other features, one of the coolest things back here that I would feel like, especially if I was a kid sitting back here, is this huge panoramic sunroof. Now with this open, you truly do have what feels like 93 million miles of blue skies, although it is tinted, which is good because if not, you'd bake in here. The coolest part is that the sunroof is still a bifold, which means that the whole front panel will actually open, giving you that airy feeling. And it's pretty big. I would hazard a guess, although I'm not gonna try, that I would fit through that hole if I actually tried to stand up, but we're not gonna be giving it a shot. What I could definitely see doing is going to a park somewhere and actually just laying back in the front seats or taking my kids out to go stargazing through the roof, because this thing is absolutely enormous. And honestly, just with the screen pulled back, it does kind of give you almost a convertible feel because the glass roof is so large. But now let's move on to some of the accoutrements that the back passengers get. Now, like I said, we have captain's chairs, which means each passenger gets their own armrest. There is this little weird tactile thing down here. Yeah. Oh, okay, we just figured out what it's for. Okay, so one of the first things that you'll notice, being that it's a captain's chair, is that each person gets armrests. Now, one thing I've noticed is that these armrests never seem to be in the most comfortable place for the most number of people. That's why Volkswagen thought of this. There's this little knob that lets you adjust where this thing locks in place. It's genius. And because it's mechanical, it's not gonna break. So I can actually use it. Now that's one of the things with the captain's chairs. The other cool thing with the captain's chairs is it actually leaves space open, which means that getting children in and out of the third row is much easier in the event that you don't want to fold the seats down. Let's talk about what's available, because this is a huge deal. One of the biggest things, especially for large SUVs, is getting the entire cabin to cool down. Having rear air conditioning is very important. And in this vehicle, it's actually separately controlled with your own climate control station here for the rear passengers, where they can't affect the one in front. Thank God, because the last thing I want is the child behind me controlling the temperature of the vehicle. That would drive me nuts. Now, from down here, the other thing worth mentioning is, like I said, there's 2 Type-C ports up front. Here, there's also 2 Type-C ports for the rear passengers, as well as a 115 volt, 150 watt, it's not the most powerful, household plug, which means you could power things like a Nintendo Switch, a laptop charger, anything like that, right off of the back in here. Now, another thing worth mentioning for the captain's chairs, depending on how big the passengers you put in the middle are, they are adjustable, forward or back, in addition to reclining. That's what happens when there's a really big person in the second row. So it's definitely a way for everyone to be comfortable. Now, I think that time has come for me to actually show how big this thing is, and I'm gonna squeeze into the third row. So as I mentioned earlier, there's this latch which allows you to move the seat forward, and you can slide the seat all the way forward, which gives you all of this room to get into the back. Wow, it's spacious back here. Let's see how far back this thing goes. Okay, it stops there. And I think I would fit in front of me. This is a lot of space for a third row, especially considering the fact that there is nearly as much cargo space as you get in a small SUV behind me, which means you could sit 6 people pretty comfortably. Now, while I'm back here, it's worth mentioning, like I said, air conditioning is important for the middle row passengers, but you've also got AC vents back here for your third row passengers, which it's easy to close them up to ensure that you're saving air for the rest of the cabin, or open them very easily. Now, in addition to the 2 USB-Cs up front, 2 in the middle, plus the household outlet, you also get 2 USB-Cs here on the third row, plus an additional 12-volt outlet to ensure everyone has power for their devices. So you're pretty much covered to ensure on a road trip that no one's gonna run out of juice on whatever they're using. And then you've also got these, which help tilt the seat forward in the event that you need to put anything in the middle. And then if you need to get out, there you go. Overall, I feel like the seatbelt wouldn't choke me. I feel comfortable. Now, to put in perspective, I'm 6'2" and I'm on the heavier side of, growing population, and I'm fitting back here comfortably. Actually, my feet are crossed. Let's see if I put my feet. Yeah, I fit. Even with the seat back and my feet uncrossed, which I did think I was gonna have to keep crossed just to fit back here, it is very comfortable and I don't feel claustrophobic. Got tons of headroom, plenty of knee room considering it's the third row. And also something worth mentioning, which I'm kind of surprised it doesn't extend to the third row. The middle row actually does have sunshades. They're not automatic, they are manual. You have to mount them yourselves, but they don't have them on the third windows. However, it is worth mentioning that the third window is kind of small, so it might not really need it. And then since this is a third row, this actually folds 50-50, and it will give you an entirely flat cargo floor. Speaking of cargo, let's head outside and see what these things actually look like when you need to put everything down and carry something. So dance moves aside, this is a foot activated, or hand, if you happen to be down there, activated rear hatch. Back here, this is where it's the party piece of the Atlas. You've got 3 ways to do this, like you do in any other 3-row car, but here you get 20.6 cubic feet of cargo space. If you fold down these seats, this bumps it up to over 50 cubic feet of space, and if you need even more room, you can actually knock down the second row, and then you've got nearly 100 cubic feet of space to carry whatever you need 100 cubic feet of space to carry. Pretty much. I did read somewhere that one magazine was actually able to get nearly 40 carry-on bags in the back of this thing, which I think is pretty impressive, where they found 40 carry-on bags to do that. Yeah. Moving on.
Now, really quickly before we move on, while I will leave a complete review of the Atlas Crossport for a future video, I did want to touch on the cargo space just in case there are people who don't feel they need the third row in the standard Atlas and are going to be looking at the Crossport. Now, with both rows up, which is the way most people would drive it so that you can seat 5 passengers, you do have 40.3 cubic feet of cargo in the back behind the second row. You can fold the second row down, which does open up total cargo volume to 77.8 cubic feet, which is pretty adequate. Not as much as the standard Atlas with the second and third row folded down, but still quite adequate for a vehicle of that size.
I think this is something that's very handsome and does present quite a nice feeling when you're actually sitting inside of it. Now, under the hood, you've got 2 options. You can either go with Volkswagen's workhorse, the 2-liter turbo, which puts out 235 horsepower and 258 foot-pounds of torque, or you can go for the 3.6-liter VR6, which actually puts out 276 horsepower and 266 foot-pounds of torque, respectively. Both will go through an 8-speed auto, feeding power to all 4 wheels via Volkswagen's aptly named 4Motion 4-wheel drive.
Now, while we're on the subject of power, it's worth talking about towing capacity. Since there are 2 engine options, believe it or not, there are actually 2 vastly different towing capacities for this vehicle. If you go with the 4-cylinder option, your towing capacity is going to be limited to just 2,000 pounds. But despite only having slightly more horsepower and torque, the V6 is rated at 5,000 pounds towing capacity. And that's for the standard Atlas and the Crossport. So they can both tow, when equipped with the V6, 2.5 tons.
So as I said, this has got a 3.6 liter VR6 engine, puts out 276 horsepower, and it's made it to an 8-speed automatic gearbox. Let's talk about the competitors to this thing. So immediate competitors that come to mind, you're thinking of the Honda Pilot and the Mazda CX-5. In terms of having 3 rows, I'm not sure if I would compare this to the Highlander or the Sequoia. My mind is telling me to lean more towards the Highlander in terms of power. This is only limited to 276 horsepower with the V6 option. If you wanted something bigger, you'd probably, and similar, you'd have to switch to Audi or Porsche. However, you are getting quite a lot of car for RAV4 money in terms of comparing it to Toyota. So now travel assist is actually turned on. Still going. So I know that there's tons of sensors around the vehicle that are actually monitoring everything, and let's see if I helped it there a little bit. So that's monitoring the traffic left and right, the lanes, and it's basically keeping itself between the lines. I think the other one that you would look for is the Lamborghini that just drove by us if you wanted more power than this.
And that is the Volkswagen Atlas. Truly one of the vehicles that if you're a VW lover, you've been waiting for, because if you started out in life like me in a GTI and wanted to keep growing the family, you either had to leave the brand altogether or go for the Rutan, which was the last family vehicle we had. Now, thanks to having a vehicle like the Atlas, Crossport, and Standard, we can actually keep our brand loyalty just like everybody from Honda, Toyota, Ford, what have you, when they go from a smaller hatchback all the way up to a full-size SUV when they want to keep growing the family. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell so you don't miss any of our upcoming future videos. I'm Alfred for Crooked Mustache. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time. Dale.